donors will start within a year after their
The
activity.
fourth part of tonight's educational activities, Massachusetts copper. Take it away.
Okay, well, I've been studying Massachusetts and collecting for quite a few years, and it's always amazed me that the Massachusetts copper seems to be the forgotten cousin of the colonials. I mean, the first metal, C4 metal, didn't even have a Massachusetts copper represented on it. And if you go to auctions, oftentimes you'll find that the Massachusetts copper really bring smallest prices, given rarity and condition, given some of the others.
Least attributed.
And right, some people say they just don't know how to attribute Massachusetts coppers because they all look alike. There's an Indian on one side and an eagle on the other. I can't attribute the Connecticut's very well because they all look the same. But that doesn't seem to stop most people from being able to figure out the better varieties. When there's only 45 varieties of the Massachusetts, not counting the contemporary counterfeits of the period, which Ryder listed and Crosby listed in their listing. So what I'm going to do today is talk about how to attribute the 1987 cents. Tom and I think when we're trying to attribute a Massachusetts cent, usually start off by attributing the reverse, because there's a few more diagnostic features there. It's a little bit easier. And then once you've got the reverse pretty well nailed down, you go and select amongst the obverses. I'm going to do things backwards tonight and look at the obverses first, and then we'll get to the reverses a little bit later. There are 14 different varieties of the 87 cent. There are 11 that were mint produced and 3 of them that were contemporary counterfeits that are commonly included in writers' listings, and some people try to collect them and some people don't, and I haven't cherry-picked any, so I don't. Once I cherry-pick the first one, then I might go after the other 4, but there's only 2 known, I think, of the 14J 1788, and that's going to be tough to get, especially since one of them's permanently in the ANS collection. So this is the Ryder 2 obverse.
Which is called 2B in a lot of...
but yeah. You know, to tell you the truth, I kind of have a difficulty distinguishing between the 2A and the 2B. Supposedly the 2B was somewhat recut to strengthen some of the letters and the star. My bad eyes, I can't tell that difference very well, so I'll just call this the obverse 2. The easiest way for me to distinguish an obverse 2, even on a very worn coin, is to look at the outside of the pleat under the Indian's right arm. It goes about halfway up, and then it takes a turn right towards the belt of the Indian. So pretty much straight up and then a turn. I call this the boomerang pleat, or the boomerang variety. There are a number of other ways to tell this one, and I got it wrong on the sheet, so you might want to make a change. This outermost pleat under the Indian's left arm, but I call it to your right, so I'm talking, I usually say on the rightmost pleat, which is to the viewer's right, is short, okay? It's a very short pleat. When I start talking now, describing things in the write-up there, I talk about the star, and that's usually what I key on first, except I know this, and this is what I always look for first. But on the star, this is the only variety of 87 where the star is pretty well balanced on both feet. If you think of the star as a man with his feet spread apart and his arms outstretched, you'll find some of them that are balanced with the right leg lower, some with the left leg lower, and that will cause the a line at the top of the arms to intersect the Indian's head in different places. So this is the only...
Let me point out also,
yeah.
just because we're just the intro.
Right.
The other thing that people sometimes look at with the star is the bottom right leg and where it seems to point relative to the nose, chin, and neck. And that's I mean, you'll find Ryder talking about that, et cetera, et cetera. No, I'm not talking specific to this variety, but I'm just saying that's what people use when they look at the star. Those 2 things. Cool.
So this is the Ryder 2, the boomerang pleat, the short pleat here, and the star that's balanced on both feet. And that's usually what I look for. And the 2 obverse comes with 5 different reverses. This is the Rider 3. Rider 3 is actually pretty easy to attribute. If you look at the star, it's balanced more on the right foot. The left leg, as you're viewing the coin, is high. It causes a line from across the top of the arms to point at the Indian's bridge of the nose, right about there. And it's the only one that's that low on the Indian's face. The only one where the line points that low on the Indian's face. As opposed to most of the dies, the Rider 3 and the Rider 4 have 9 pleats in the lower part of the tunic. Most of them have 7. The outermost pleat nearest the bow also has a short outer pleat, and the outer pleat is also pretty much void up here at the top where it goes to the belt, and it gives the Indian a kind of a hippie look. I mean, and not hippie as in the 1960s hippies, but has kind of a protruding bottom. And between the star and the number of pleats, that is a die that's fairly easy to distinguish and recognize, even on very worn specimens.
Mike, before you go on, could we do just a fast, just general, these are the various attribution points that are used on the obverse, not specific to this die, but just so you start training what the various places people tend to look.
I tend to look at the star to begin with. I look at the pleats in the skirt, which bottoms of the pleats are high or low, how many pleats there are in the skirt, and the characteristics of the shape of the pleats on the outside. You can also look at if the bow touches the mound, or if it doesn't touch the mound. If you go back to, I guess I lost something.
Oh, here we are.
Okay, here's the Rider 2. If you look at the end of the bow, it basically touches the top of the toe of the moccasin. And that's pretty diagnostic on this particular variety, but a well-worn specimen will sometimes wear in that area, and it's a little bit harder to distinguish. On the Rider 3, the bow touches the mound and is somewhat distant from the foot. Occasionally you'll find that the letters are distinguishable by gaps or letters, the letters being very close in pairs. There's nothing terribly distinguishing about the letters in the Rider 3 to my eye.
Let me mention a couple of the other diagnostic
Okay.
points. Any words? Push this thing?
Push the red button.
You often look at the top of the arrow and where it is relative to the letter E. I mean, or sometimes it's up on W, sometimes between, and sometimes over here. So you look over there. How close the shaft is to the gap between the shaft and the skirt is sometimes significant. And this will vary from variety to variety. We'll get specific, but these are the type of places you look. Sometimes the arrow comes very close. Sometimes it's far. Sometimes it's low down here. Sometimes it ends about over here. So how far it is from the skirt and how far down the arrow protrudes and where it ends relative to here are very important. Sometimes you have mounds that are somewhat steep, and some of them are a little bit more shallow and wider. You also look, and this varies. There are some dies that you'll find the same die in different states or different recuttings. The grass will either be there or not be there. So you sometimes have like a 7 die or some of the other dies, a 10 die, an 88s. You know, both the same die may or may not have grass, but you look for this because you can see positioning. Like if you see something like that and you're mistaking a die for something else that never has grass there, you go, oops, mistake. So that's another one of the areas that people use. And the other thing is how close the top of the bow is to the end, the angle, a little bit the angle of this relative to the end, and how high it rises compared to the letter. This doesn't go. This one would be considered not to go to the top of the letter. Some would be considered to go higher to the top of the letter. Those are some of the.
Todd, do we have die rust above the right arm?
What we have here, there's a little spike in the die, and it's one of the diagnostic points for obverse 3, and it points back up towards the Indian's shoulder. So there's a little spike there. A number of the Massachusetts coppers have little spikes coming out of the arms or the legs. Not as many on the 87 cents as on some of the other denominations, especially the half cents. Obverse 4, it's a very easy one identify. This one is also, the right leg is slightly lower. This is not a particularly high-grade example, but then I don't have too many high-grade examples in my collection of the 4 others. But it's slightly lower on the right leg. The line from the top of the star is at about the juncture of the hairline and the forehead of the Indian. The Indian is looking down, the head is bowed.
We sometimes call it the aged Indian.
Or the aged Indian, I call it the bowed head, but I saw the aged Indian for the first time in the catalog, so, but you probably found it in another catalog.
No, I mean,
Also, there is no line joining the Indian's right shoulder to your left with the jaw, and there's really no line joining the shoulder to the head here, so the head is floating in the air. There are a couple of other dies, Avers 2 is one of them, where the line is really quite faint here, but you'll find that the hair makes a good contact with the shoulder and the collar. Okay, another diagnostic on Avers 4 is that the pleat on your left is low. The bow doesn't really quite touch the mound.
this is a pretty steep mound.
Yeah, it really angles up. There's really maybe a little bit of grass between the feet, but there's no grass off on this right-hand side of the mound. So that's the diagnostics of the 4. The slightly low star, slightly low on the right, the bowed head, the severed head, and the long pleat nearest the bow.
The arrow goes down rather low too.
And the arrow is pretty low.
Mike?
Yes.
It truthfully looks like the die, honestly, there's no elbows on either arm. Number one, and the sash looks fairly wide, just, you know, without any other comparison to it. Does that mean anything?
Well, it's not one of...
Any stripes?
No, I mean, there's lots of different diagnostics between these. What I'm telling you is the ones that I tend to key on. And, you know, if you... many people have different characteristics that they look for, but I tend to look for characteristics that will be pretty easily seen even on a well-worn coin.
Because with this particular Avers, to me, the angle, the downcast look of the head is so different than any other angle. Most of the Indians looking straight ahead, or even like uplifted chin, almost like noble, looking into this. This one is like dejected. Think of it that way, and it really is a different.
His body parts are.
Well, that would depress anyone.
So far, if you're looking only at the star, the 2 Avers, the feet were pretty even on the ground. The 3 and the 4, the right foot is a little bit lower. It's lower on the 3 Avers than on the 4. On the 6 Avers, and this varieties with the Avers 1, 5, and 7 are contemporary counterfeits. On the 6, the star is lower on its left foot, so that a line from the top of the arms will point at the feathers atop the Indian's head. On this coin too, the line from the shoulder is weak, but it has a pretty strong connection, the hair to the shoulder. It's got a wider collar than on most of the others. All of the hair is inside the collar on this one. The arrowhead, the inside point on the arrowhead is even with the bottom of the pleat.
It's close to the skirt
and it's very close. The feather ends are very well defined. Some of the others, it's much more mushy. And the bow rests pretty solidly on the mound. And here again, it's a relatively high mound with a little bit of grass between the bow and the foot, between the feet, and on the outside of the foot to the right as you're viewing the coin.
By the way, what you'll find probably is that each person, as I'm listening to Mike and realizing he looks at different places a little bit earlier than I do. You'll train your own eye to what's apparent to you. I mean, I'm always looking at the generically. He actually learned some of these attribution points, like this one will look this way. I haven't memorized this. This is fascinating. I kind of do it by process of elimination because I haven't learned to look for some of these real subtle things. So I usually start out right over here, right over here, and say, well, it can't be that, can't be that. It's too close, it's too far, it's not, low enough, and then I start working out from there. But if you can start memorizing some of these real specific characteristics, you can cut right through all that.
Okay. Another distinguishing characteristic between the 6 obverse and the 8 obverse, which we'll come to next, is that the O and the M are widely separated. There's a pretty good space there. And this one is only found with reverse G. The 3 is with reverse G, the 4 is with reverses C, D, J, and then reverse I of 1788.
Which is an omission in the catalog.
The J, yeah, the 4J is an omission. I had to be nasty and point that out.
Yeah.
I didn't have a photograph of my 8G, but I do have a pressing of it, which did not photograph particularly well. But the star, again, is lower on the left foot, as in number 6. Other characteristics are, if you look at the bottom of the pleats and the arrowhead, there's some distance there. This is a very scarce variety. It's a R6 plus now. It used to be called R7, but it's an R6 plus. So there's a gap between the bottom of the pleat and the arrowhead barb right here. Whereas on 6 they were pretty much evenly. The bottom of the bow does not touch the foot or the mound, which is also diagnostic on this particular variety. And the O and the M are very, very close.
I'm going to use this as a moment to just remind you of how we start us out, which is that we usually start out with the reverses. So for instance, you would probably pretty quickly figure out that you have G reverse. And then all you would have to do is, like, if it wasn't too worn, you could just look at the edge of the arrow and say, is that a 6 or a 3? Because those are the only two that
No, the J.
Oh, yeah, no,
So the 2 and the 3 also.
Yeah, yeah.
On this one, what Tom tends to look at first is the butt of the arrow is more underneath the center right of the E. Most of them are higher up on the E, underneath the upright, or maybe a little bit inside the upright. And it's also relatively separated from the E. But this is the tough variety, so it's nice to know the star is lower on the left side, the arrowhead is distant from the pleat, the bow is not touching the mound, the OM are connected, and also this pleat on the outside on the right nearest the arrow is very, very thick. It's actually 2 pleats that wear together very quickly.
Mike?
Yes.
Talk about the arrow, the quills of the arrow versus the E or the verticals. Are you using the upper point of the quill?
I usually try to do it with the end of the shaft. So the feathers will go out. Sometimes it's not so easy to tell, but usually the end of the shaft. And that I don't have any of the counterfeits. If you don't have wax plates on the Massachusetts copper, see Mike Ringo and he can probably arrange to get you some there. Very good. There are also a number of auction catalogs that have some pretty good examples. The Taylor has a nice 5I. Norweb has a very nice 1B. I think the owner's in this room, or at least the purchaser from the Norweb sale is in this room. You have to go to a couple of Stax catalogs really to find examples of 7H.
Did you have any recollection what the catalogs are, or dates and names?
There's one from the best plate I think I saw for the 7H was I think it was June or July of '73, I believe. But I don't remember the name of the sale. But there's been some more recently. In the early '90s, there was a Stax sale with a 7H in it, but I don't recall. I couldn't find it when I was going through my catalogs, and I don't recall exactly when it was.
The light tan catalog, and it's the Breezeland sale.
Thank you.
It's absolutely correct.
I confirm that.
Okay. One of the diagnostics of the counterfeits is that the Indians tend to look stouter than the Indians.
Can we set up the counterfeits on the
Maybe we can look at the counterfeits.
on this thing for us?
The old
Oh.
on here.
Well, does that work?
The 3 bottom.
Very bottom
Show
of
me
the
which
sheet.
one.
Those
The
are
3 bottom ones?
Yeah, well, this one, that one, and the one in the middle.
Oh, okay.
So this
This is a you can see the whole angles are just kind of warped here. It just looks
right.
a little different.
This is the 1B, 1788. The diagnostic for me is the chin on the Indian. It really juts out. There's not really a line going from the right shoulder past the collar, but the line on the inside of the collar and the neck is very strong. Pretty well. We'll go to the next one. This is the 7 obverse. One of the diagnostics I find with all of the counterfeits is that the bows tend to really bulge out from the bowstring. They have almost like an M look to them, where the regular ones tend to be a little bit flatter in here, whereas the counterfeits will bow out a little bit more. This is also a relatively stout Indian. He has a pretty huge stomach, and his right forearm right forearm is very massive. It's a Popeye type forearm.
I'll point that at this point, for instance, I would need the plate. If I came across, if I cherried a counterfeit, I would need the plate most likely to try to figure out which one it is. But just the shape, after you train your eye to look at mass coppers, the Indians are pretty noble looking. They're usually, they're pretty regular. That's the whole thing about it. So there's something, they just look different. All the counterfeits just really look different. Just the shape of the Indian. Throw it off.
And this fat guy is the 5 obverse. One of the diagnostics for me is that from his armpit down to the edge of the pleat nearest to the arrow is pretty much a straight line. It goes in a little bit at the waist, but otherwise it's pretty much a straight line.
That's quite a mound. That surfboard down here.
Yeah, it's a surfboard of a mound, but the bow is strong to about his knees, and then you get some, it almost looks like die rust or something going down. It wasn't fully cut in, so that's another diagnostic for the 5. Those are all fairly scarce, R7s to R7 pluses. The 7 is probably the most common of the counterfeits, and the 5 is probably slightly the rarest of the counterfeits.
What do they tend to weigh?
Beg pardon?
What do those tend to weigh, the counterfeits?
I don't know. They probably have the weight of the one that was sold in the Norweb sale, and maybe the Taylor coin, but I don't know how characteristic those particular specimens are of the group as a whole.
The ones that are overstruck, the Connecticut's, usually running about 120-ish.
Right, 120 for the. So they're very lightweight. I don't have any records really. I didn't copy that down into my notes because I've got the catalog, but I don't recall what the weights were on those others.
I don't know.
If they were all made at Machin's, and certainly when we get to the reverses of the H and the I reverse for 77, I mean the date punches are so similar to the 87C reverse and the reverse on the Britannia Vermont that it almost has to be the same punches. On the 1B, the 8s are different. They're more like a regular 8 with a loop crossing diagonals. Whereas on the 7 and the 8 and the 87C, they look like one circle on top of another one, so the line is more horizontal than crossing. There's another diagnostic on the reverses too. For most of them, sometimes it's a little bit confusing. For the reverses, that was just momentarily. We'll start off with reverse A. This is only found paired with a 2 obverse. This particular coin has about the deepest clip I've seen on any Massachusetts. They tend to come full planchets. I've seen a couple with slight clips in them, but not very many. I've seen a couple of Pfeifferts for the half cents, basically a large cent planchet, where they cut out a half cent planchet from a large cent planchet. The diagnostics on the A reverse here there are 4 leaves in the branch, 4 leaves above the talon. There's 1 leaf down here below the talon, and most of the reverse dice have 5 leaves in the talon. One of the counterfeits only has 4. The arrow, the bottommost arrow, is pretty much horizontal above the period and ends slightly beyond the period. This reverse die is also pretty diagnostic because it has the horn. This is a very early dice date. There's one in the sale which is an earlier dice date. It comes up, this line of the backward Z is not nearly so strong as it is on this particular specimen. And while you can see some slight lines going through the leftmost serif of the H, it's very, very weak on that particular piece. But
The earlier die states are much less common.
yeah, much less common than the later die states. But it comes in probably 5 or 6 different die states. You go from just that little nub really to this die state, to one where it breaks out from here up to the H, and then it breaks out farther to the H, and then it'll break out above the H and have a nice kind of a crescent moon look, and it also fills in a little bit back here. It also has rust pits in the die down here and behind the eagle's head, and they're on almost all of them, and they grow as the die wears. So this is the A reverse. Other things to look for here, diagnostic, is the date. The date is evenly spaced. The tops of all the numerals are pretty much in a line. There are 2 lines above, which most of these have. The bottommost line is thicker than the topmost line, which is also fairly common, but they're fairly well separated.
If you're dealing with a less obvious variety and your normal attribution point maybe are the leaves or the arrows or something, and you're having trouble seeing something because it's a low grade, the date is often a very good place to work with. The way the spacing of the letters and the height, relative to each other, even out the numerals.
The next reverse that's not a counterfeit is, I have a couple of die states here of the horned eagle. Before it was just a little skinny line going like this. Now it's filled in a bit, and it's filled in a bit more here too. This is about terminal with the horn going up above the H. Here again, it's got a period down here. The bottommost arrow is horizontal, well above the period. And then, I guess this a little bit later because it fills in a little bit more over here.
Was there ever any attempt to fix that?
As far as I know, there wasn't.
No laughing at all, because the shield is sort of losing some detail, whether or not that get lapped.
It could be that these are just pieces that are not terribly high grade, When I'm looking for wear points on the coin, trying to grade, one of the things I tend to look at is the feathers or the little nubs on the eagle's knees. That's one of the high points on the reverse, and they tend to wear fairly quickly. If you find one with very little wear on there, you probably have a coin that's very close to uncirculated. And the more wear, the lower the grade. You also get a fair amount of wear on the outside of the wings, like on this piece. I think we'll finally get to reverse C. Okay, this is reverse C. The easiest thing for me about reverse C is the bottommost arrow touches the period, or pierces the period, or connects with the period if you want to try to remember C with connects. There's no horn above the eagle. There's a large space between the first 2 S's in Massachusetts, which is diagnostic for this particular die. The bottommost leaf comes very close. It points pretty much horizontally down, but it's got this little spike at the tip that points back towards the tail feathers. The date, the 1-7 are pretty much widely spaced, or more widely spaced than the other letters, and the 8 is high and leans to the left somewhat. Here again, it's got 2 lines. The bottommost is thicker, but not as much thicker as it is on the A reverse. Okay, and this is die paired with obverse 4 and obverse 2.
What I was going to say is, Mike, again, it has some of these exact attribution points, but I never really quite realized that, for instance. But if you're the type of person who hasn't got to that stage yet, and you just kind of do things by process of elimination, you say, well, it can't be that because blank. Well, how about this one? I find that the array of the leaves on this branch vary much more so than most other parts of the whole coin, obverse or reverse. So by simply concentrating on the branch and placement of the leaves, the angle that the branch is going with, that the leaves are spaced evenly, all of that stuff, there are a lot of differences in leaf arrangement, and you can very quickly often eliminate can't be this, can't be that, can't be that. Also, even just the general array of the arrows, sometimes they're kind of like widely separated. Sometimes they're just all jagged and tight. So those give you some real quick visuals if you have plates. If you don't have the plates, you need the specifics. But you have the plates, you can kind of say can't be this, can't be that. So these are 2 of the areas I use for that purpose.
So this is with obverse 4 first use, obverse 2 the later use. And this particular reverse die will develop a break from the end towards the rim, doesn't reach the rim until later die states. And then it'll start breaking out from below the 7 through the 1. And it breaks out in a series of islands, which as the die wears kind of form together. But there's almost always a break in this area. So it's not a solid line even in the later die states.
Scarce to die, by the way.
Yes, it's a much scarcer die. But you can find several intermediate die states of this particular reverse die also. This is reverse die D, ABCD. Here again I start off with the arrows and where they are in relation to the period. This is the one variety where the bottommost arrow is below the horizontal and does not touch the period, so you can say this arrow is slanting downward for D, if you like. These two leaves, the very tips of them point in towards each other, which is diagnostic for this particular die. This is one of the dies that has two lines. The bottommost line is very light compared to the upper line, which is very, very thick. Another diagnostic here is if you look at the date, the date's fairly evenly spaced, but both the 7s are heavily tilted towards the right, especially the first 7.
Mike, could you do me a favor, and I know it's the other machine, I don't know how to work it out. Could you alternate back and forth between this one and the preceding one a couple times fast?
Okay.
Just look at the leaves and the arrows, just to get an impression. I'm trying to disprove the idea that these things are all so similar, you can't see any differences.
Okay.
Good, we're going to win this one.
Yeah, we will. Okay. This is C. This is D. So look at the arrangement of the leaves, the arrangement of the arrows. C again.
Are the 7s long on this coin?
They're pretty long.
Okay.
Right. They tend to blend in, and that's partly a characteristics of the grades of coins that I can afford to purchase.
Branches going straight
And then
up
we
that.
go back to the two 4 leaves, horizontal and not quite vertical.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
This reverse only comes with obverse 4, the bowed head or bowed head or the aged Indian. This is my late state of reverse E. One of the diagnostics here, the bottommost arrow slightly above horizontal does not reach the period, so it points over the top of the period. It's got, again, 5 leaves, but they don't point towards each other. On this die, if you look at the date, the 1-7 are fairly close relative to the 7-8, and then the 8-7 are fairly close. The 8-7 are high, almost close to the heavier bar. This is really 2 bars that kind of blend into one after a while as the coin wears. Here again, the 8 is leaning a little bit left, but you have the 8-7 both high compared. This particular die bulges fairly early. In this area you get a little bulge, and then you get a crack from the rim to the T, and later you get a crack pretty much all the way through the wing on the later die states. This one's kind of tough to identify as a crack going through there, but the whole die bulges out. And that crack is diagnostic if you get a later die state one. Even on the early to middle die state ones, you can oftentimes see a little bulge. If you rotate the coin a little bit, you can see that it kind of peaks up a little bit. Let's see, the C and the H are pretty well separated on this particular one, and the T and the T are pretty well separated on this one also. Do you have other diagnostics that you look at?
What about the U, Mike?
Well, the U is a little bit low compared to the H, and the H seems to be a little bit more farther right than on some of the
Basically,
others.
looking at the right side of the U versus the left side of the U, one's lower than the other. It's not
Is that
an
back-
even
Right,
U.
yeah, okay, I didn't know. Thank you. I hadn't noticed that before.
Are the letters all hand cut?
No, they're punched, but some of them have been strengthened after their, the serifs.
That U
It's a
looks like,
funky C right there.
yeah, also.
Yeah. The C's a little bit, but the C is not uncharacteristic. This die, the U is a little bit lower on the right too. I mean the top of the U.
Now, if you ever have a really low-grade 87 piece and you can't, and you're hoping it's a rarity and there's no date, you can help eliminate things by looking at the S's and making sure they're open S's.
Yeah.
All the 87s have open S's, and only some of the 88s do.
This is a reverse. It's only with obverse 2, 2E or 2BE. This is the transposed arrows. So if you look over here and you see that the arrows are very tightly bunched and in the wrong talon, you may have a transposed arrows. There's a lot of deceptive counterfeits out there, especially electrotypes. But one of the diagnostics here is the arrows are all really quite tight, close together on this one. The last arrow points at the second bottom feather on the wing. The end of the wing is farther down on the M than on any other any other 87 reverse, almost down as far as the junction of the diagonals here. If you look back at almost any of the others, the wingtip is much higher in relation to the M. And that is one thing that will, if you get a transposed arrows that's recut from another reverse die, that will be very, very obvious unless somebody does a good job of extending that wing. The tail feathers are really quite close together, and their outsides are almost straight lines going down. The date is pretty tight. The 1/7 are slightly more separated, but the date is really kind of crammed together, and it's pretty much crammed up against the lower of the two lines, which is thinner. The top line is much thicker than the lower line.
Also, Mike, the word 1 cent is protruding instead of indented.
That's true. You can't see that on most of these transposed arrows, but the 1 cent protrudes from the breast shield here instead of being incused into it. Very, very interesting thing I found at the Massachusetts Historical Society today. I was looking up the names of people, and Joseph Callender, who is one of the die cutters, and the die cutters for the 87 cents and half cents, and most of the 88 cents, or a lot of the 88 cents. I got an order of rum from Caleb Davis, who is a goods seller in Boston at the time, and so on the 27th he bought a lot of rum. On the 29th he delivered his first die to Joshua Weatherly, and I don't know whether this is the result of a little bit of drinking or what, but the letters are slightly different. If you look at the A's especially, they seem to be much broader than on the other varieties. The M also seems to be a little bit more widely spaced. So I think this has a little serif at the top of the C. The others don't have the serif at the top of the C. They're different letter punches, and I don't know what the meaning of that is. I mean, it's paired with a 2 obverse, a genuine 2 obverse, but whether this was one of the dies that Callender cut or a die that somebody else cut, I mean, Weatherly has been blamed for cutting this particular die. It's I don't know, but the lettering on this or the punches, letter punches are certainly different. If you look at the top of the U, the right side is as high as the left side, and there's a little bit more of a serif on the S's than there are on the earlier dies. This is more of a club serif. You know, on the top it goes up and down. On this one it just pretty much goes down. So I haven't figured that one out yet. And the last of the, well, this is not the last, it's the next to the last. This is a G reverse. It's paired with 4 different obverse dies. It's fairly easy to attribute because these 3 leaves, the tips are almost in a line. The tip of the leaf at the end is slightly low, but that's pretty much diagnostic. One of the counterfeit reverses also has leaves whose tips are aligned, but those leaves tend to be a little bit longer and thinner, so they're diagnostically different. The arrows on this, the major arrows, are pretty thick, and this one especially shows up as being thick. The topmost arrow shows up as being thick, and you can recognize that even on well-worn pieces. And on this one there is a slip of the graver's tool, and it goes through the wing. The arrow doesn't quite reach the wing. And on the 3 obverse, it's very, very obvious that there's this scratch coming out of the top of the wing, which is an extension of the arrow. On the 6 obverse, it's less noticeable. There's a nub. On the 8, paired with the 8 obverse, it's just a little nub sticking up past the wing, and I haven't noticed it on any pairing with a 2 obverse. So I think that the order of emissions here would be 3, 6, 8, 2. Just a little bit. There's a single line above the date, which is pretty much diagnostic, I think, and the date is spaced 17, and then there's a gap between the 7 and the 8, and the 8, 7 are a little bit more widely spaced than the 17. So the date and the line, and then the tops of the leaves here are pretty much diagnostic. How are we doing?
3 minutes.
3 minutes. Okay, this is pretty much the last slide I have. This is a J. This is paired with obverse die 4, and there are 4 specimens known. One of the diagnostics here is the bottommost arrow is horizontal. It points over but does not reach the period. On the A reverse, it extends beyond. The second arrow almost touches the S in Massachusetts, which is diagnostic for this particular variety. These leaves are different, closer together. The 3 leaves on the top are closer together than any other reverse of 87. And the 2 lower leaves pretty much point one to each of the legs, or actually it's the inner serif here, the rightmost serif of each leg. And that makes this diagnostic.
Also the date is slanted down.
And the date is slanted downward, right? It kind of starts high on the right and works its way down. The 8 is again slanted but not high. So this is the one of the scarce ones. If you find this reverse, buy it cheap and sell it to me or Tom cheap. I think Tom's looking for one.
I'm looking for one.
And but right now there's only 4 known. So this is a very tough reverse die. I can ask, are there any questions? Okay, we're going to have a pop quiz. Oh, this is one of the 87 dies. This is the 87 a B die, 1B. It also only has 4 leaves here. One of the diagnostics of the counterfeits is that this bottommost arrow angles well above the horizontal, and it's diagnostic for all 3 of the counterfeits. The other diagnostic is that this stem ends in a stem. It doesn't end in a leaf. So there's a cut end pretty much flat for all of these, and that's diagnostic on all of the counterfeits. So if you find
The right wing is also a lot lower
and
to the scent line.
well, yeah, but this is rotated, so I didn't get a good.
No, I mean literally.
Under the wing.
Yeah.
Well, it's like
You can
you're
see it
talking
right
about-
there. It comes out a lot lower than it is over
right,
there. Yeah.
Right. And most of these, the ones you find are fairly low grade. There are a couple that you can see this, and this was the Norwood pointing, I believe. Now we'll get to the real quick pop quiz of about 30 seconds. Anybody want to take a guess at this one? It's lower on the left. The arrow and the bottom of the pleats are pretty much on a straight line. Bow touches the mound. This is obverse 6. This is obverse 6. And this particular arrow points below the period, points down. The 2 leaves here, tips point at each other.
Just to assimilate on this.
That's reverse D. You gotta. If I was any good of a teacher, you'd be picking this out real quick. 3 leaves or tips are pretty much aligned. This arrow is close to vertical in fat. Single line over the date. G reverse. Now what about this guy? I guess he's looking down. He looks a little hippie, but he's not really the hippie. I mean, this outer pleat is thick, but he's looking down. This is obverse 4.
You just showed us that.
I did show it to you. Which one is it?
That's the one to sell to Tom?
No, this one I haven't sold it, Tom.
You can sell it to me, yeah, sure.
This is the J. There's also another diagnostic on the J. It's got 2 little folded leaves on each side of this first leaf pointing up. So this one is a little bit more obvious here, but there's also one that's sleeping between those 2 leaves. That's the J reverse. That's a good 1.5.
Oh, that's below the home.
Now you've seen this one twice already. That's a D reverse. The arrow points down below the period. How about that funny guy? Anybody notice?
Boomerang.
The boomerang, that's obverse too. Right.
That's all I remember.
And that's
Horned eagle.
That's a horned eagle, right, okay. C, and the arrow connects to the period, and I think that's about all the time we have.
And there are more rarities of cherry in the 88 series, so we put that off later, because we're still trying to get a couple.
The tough ones, I'll tell you that the tough ones in this particular, okay.